Welcome to Charity Champions, the podcast celebrating the inspiring leaders and making a real difference across the charity sector. I'm your host, Emily Formby from Charity Recruit. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Andrew Caudell, CEO of Kids for Kids, an international development charity that spent the last 25 years transforming lives across Darfur, Sudan. Andy joined the organisation earlier this year after a successful commercial career and many years serving as a charity trustee. He now leads one of the most challenging transitions any leader can face, succeeding a really inspirational founder while shaping the charity's future. Today, we're going to be talking about purpose, leadership, strategic growth, authenticity, and what it really means to inherit a legacy whilst creating your own. Andy, welcome to Charity Champions.
It's a great pleasure to be here, Emily. Thanks for the invitation.
It's absolutely fantastic to have you on, and I know it's quite timely for you at the moment. You've just come off the back of your strategy day yesterday with the board. So talk to me and our audience about how the last few months have been since we spoke. Life settled down, I imagine, a little bit, or has it become even busier taking the new role on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's become busier, but almost sort of deliberately, because you spend those first few weeks and into the first few months kind of really just getting your feet under the table and understanding the rhythm, if you like, of the organization itself. And then you start to think, okay, what does the future look like? And I'm really lucky because I've got an incredibly supportive board. And evidence of that was yesterday when we all got together for an in-person meeting, which is kind of revolutionary in these days of hybrid working, isn't it? But that was really, I suppose, was formative, and in a sense, I feel like my job starts now, because we've now really defined a roadmap, if you like, for how we want the charity itself to develop and the things we want to focus on. And I asked this question, what do we want to be when we grow up, bearing in mind that we're 25 years old, which made the founder Patricia laugh, thankfully. But it's kind of true, because there's always transition, there's always progression, and that's really what we're focused on. And for me personally, having a unified board with clarity and alignment, it takes so much of the stress away from wondering if you're doing the right thing. And I think that 100%. For me, that was such a valuable sort of takeaway from yesterday's meeting.
I think it's that communication piece, isn't it? Knowing where everybody's at, and having those open communication lines really makes the difference. You're not second guessing yourself then, are you, when you're in this role? Just before we talk about your own journey, I'd love the listeners to understand more about the organisation that you're leading, your sort of role into that. So tell us about the story. Well, it's quite an unusual original story, isn't it? Tell us about the start.
And the founder, a formidable, amazing lady. Her name's Patricia Parker, and she was honoured with an OBE a few years back. Yes, incredible lady. She is the reason why Kids for Kids exists, and I'll tell you the story, because it's so fundamental to why we're at where we're at. She and her son Alistair, he was working in the Foreign Office and was actually based in Khartoum, in capital of Sudan, and Patricia went out there just kind of on a visit and accompanied him on some work. They were driving in the desert, and in the distance they saw this little speck, so to speak, and as they got closer, it was clear that it was a child, a young child. And he's carrying a jerry can, and it's in the middle of the desert. It's kind of like 35-degree heat. So Patricia, being a mum, obviously kind of concerned, and taking a very long story into much abridged version, she took the child, we'll call him Ibrahim for want of a name, and wanted to meet his mother and his family, which they were able to do. I'd love to believe they actually gave him a lift after they collected the water that he'd gone to I'm sure they did. But Ibrahim had a 7-hour round trip every day to go and collect water. And the frustrating thing is Darfur sits on one of the biggest aquifers in the world. It's the size of Belgium. So there is water there, but it's just getting access to it. But that chance meeting prompted a question. And the question, although it probably wasn't asked in the same kind of terms as I'm putting it now, was what do we need to do to help this child, this community flourish? Because clearly that is not a particularly sustainable way to live, having to walk
No.
7 hours every day, water for the family, because that meant he wasn't getting an education. He was basically taking his role as the lead man of the family, and I think he was 11 years old at the time. We can't contemplate that in this country, can we? So there's a different set of rules that the people of Darfur were living under. From that meeting, Patricia then resolved to found a charity, and the charity essentially it exists purely to create the conditions in which that community can flourish. And the mode in which they identified that needed to be done was a couple of things. One of them was, access to water through the provision of hand pumps. But what came first, and this is why the charity is called Kids for Kids. And if anybody's still listening, I've got to the interesting part, which is Patricia realised that goats, good old-fashioned goats, were almost like the key to survival because they're incredibly resilient animals on their own. They'll eat virtually anything, so they're not difficult to maintain in that sense, but they provide protein-rich milk. And that protein-rich milk is the life giver to a community where malnutrition, hunger is almost the watchword. But if you have a goat, it means you can feed a child. And if you can feed a child, that child can grow, that child can develop, that community can flourish. And the from that one simple goat loan, it's sort of five goats and a billy goat given to the poorest family in a village. They were then able to feed their family, sell some milk, which gave them financial independence. Those goats then produced their own offspring, courtesy of the billy goat, obviously, and they were able to then pass on those goats to the next family. And this rotation essentially it mushroomed. And if I truncate the next 25 years, Patricia has overseen the adoption of 110 villages in Darfur.
Oh, really?
Oh, I kid you not.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And we've impacted, I think it's in excess of 600,000 lives now.
Wow.
And that's what Kids for Kids is. It's not just goats, it's not just water. We provide donkeys, we provide seeds, we provide mosquito nets, we provide blankets. It's mushroomed into education, which, as you know, is the route out of poverty for many communities. We build kindergartens in the areas so that the children can get an education. We provide healthcare in the form of setting up clinics. We also train midwives because labour is potentially well, I hesitate to use the words death sentence, and I apologise for the insensitivity of that word, but women fear labour because there's access to no healthcare. So we train midwives, and those midwives then train more midwives, and they train more midwives, so that the impact is multiplied. So these ripples continue, and also we plant trees, and trees resist climate change because they enrich the environment, but they slow down desertification, because we're sub-Saharan Africa, so that's a continuing issue. So there's so many different threads to what Kids for Kids has become, but I think centrally it comes back to that one question that Patricia and Alistair asked of themselves, which is, how can we help this community flourish? And that's what we became.
It's amazing, isn't it? Particularly when you look at the response to that, rather than it just being how we're responding to this particular crisis, you're looking wider than that. How can you create that lasting change and help in a more meaningful way for the sustained period of time?
Yeah, and the word I should have used actually is, we talk about the delivery of sustainable projects, which this is the very definition of sustainability.
Absolutely.
One of Patricia's favourite phrases is that she doesn't believe in charity, but she believes in helping people to help themselves.
Right.
I think that's very much the watchword. And just a note on Patricia. that is what I consider to be a consequential life. And I think to then pick up the mantle from where she leaves off and run with it is a moral obligation on the
Yeah.
part of everybody involved, trustees, members of staff alike, to keep this growing and elevating. And the thing is, even though we've adopted 110 villages, there are many, many, many more that we can still touch in a positive way.
So what's that transition been like then? You've obviously, Patricia's still being active within the organisation, but has taken a step back from that sort of founding CEO role. Talk me through how that process came about and where your involvement was.
Yeah. Obviously I sort of came into it knowing that there was this kind of transition period, and it's sort of like finding your way and finding the right things for each of us to be doing. And Patricia's kind of gravitated, if you like, towards, I hesitate to use the word ambassadorial position.
Okay. Yeah.
But obviously she is the face and the heart and soul of the charity, and that will never change. So she maintains a very strong connection to a lot of our supporters, a lot of our original donors who've been with her on the journey. And it's kind of been like a passing of, what's that word they used? A passing of the responsibility, I suppose, to me to pick up my own things. But also, what's been great is being given the freedom to really think about what those next 5 to 10 to 15 years looks like. And we rather loftily talk about a generational strategy, and I think that's a laudable aim. Truth is, you've got to get the near term right, so there's still a focus on the nuts and bolts, the everyday operational running of the charity, and that it kind of is probably the most important thing, to keep the doors open and making sure we can still support the people that we're privileged to do so. So it's been an ongoing process, and you can almost see, if you imagine two graphs of activity, they're sort of converging and then passing over in the middle. And we're very definitely into the passing over piece. But
excellent.
Yes.
So is Patricia remaining on the board then?
Yes.
Will she be a trustee?
Yeah, she is, and she maintains the chair of the board itself. She's also maintaining an active role in the actual delivery of the projects in Darfur.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and one of the developmental pieces of that is that we need to recruit an in-country director effectively to manage the projects that go on, and that means coordinating the activity and also working with the volunteers. I haven't mentioned them yet, but the incredibly brave people of Darfur who partner with Kids for Kids to make sure we can deliver the projects that they have told us they need. So whilst that piece remains in flux, and the reason it's in flux, Emily, is sadly, and the thing we need to say out loud is, Sudan is acknowledged as the UN's world's worst humanitarian crisis. That's been reported for the last few years. Conflict broke out, and it's now into its 4th year. The devastating consequences of that we don't need to recount in this podcast, but 19.5 million people have been displaced either internally or have fled to one of the bordering countries. So it's an almost intolerable situation in which to live and to thrive and to prosper. And into all of that mix, of course, we're still trying to do the work that we know needs to be done, and which is exacerbated by the turmoil of the situation in country.
What a difficult situation to be operating in. And like you said, I'm sure you're very grateful to the volunteers there that are doing
gratitude
the good work.
Isn't even close, Emily. Or would be a better way to describe it.
Yeah. I mean, what a fascinating journey of the charity. Let's have a look at your leadership journey, because I know you joked with me on the phone that you kind of stumbled into sort of charity leadership, but you did spend quite a few years preparing for a move into the charity sector, didn't you? Talk me through your commercial background and how you got to where you are.
I mean, it was utterly premeditated. I was joking when I say I stumbled. I'd been in a medical environment virtually from from leaving school, actually. And I was a young parent. I've got 3 beautiful girls. Myself and my wife, we're coming up 40 years together now, 40 years married, and we've so that kind of determined my path, really. And I was in medical sales forever and a day, and thinking I'd be there for the rest of my career. But in truth, um, maybe it's a thing of age, but at some point I started to really think about purpose, and I started to think about what's authentically me. And I've been kind of leaning. I've volunteered for different charities. One of the ones I was really proud to be involved with is the Make-A-Wish Foundation, which is there are parallels actually between that and Kids for Kids, because it's entirely self-governed, if you like. There's no external commissioning and such like. It's all about relationships with the public, and very similar to Kids for Kids in that sense. So that was my first taste, and I'd always had this nagging feeling that that's where I would go, and that just got stronger as I saw my children grow. And you connect as a parent, and I started to want to think about what's my real purpose, where can I be of most value. And so whilst I enjoyed, and I've been very lucky in my career, I've traveled the world, and I've worked for some incredible CEOs, and there's 2 of them in particular, Kevin and Walter. They know who they are, so I don't need to tell you anymore. But they, if they told me to go and build a franchise for a medical distribution on the moon, I would have done it, because that was the impact they had on me. But they don't know how they taught me to be authentically me. And that said, I took that lesson and started to look at my entire future and what I wanted it to mean. And the biggest driver for me was, what would my kids admire most about me? And it was very easy at that point. Well, go and be useful. Go and be useful, Dad. Go and be consequential.
What a lovely motivator.
Yeah, and it's and it's still the same today. So I became a trustee of a charity, the Child Brain Injury Trust, which is run by an incredible lady, the very definition of resilience and compassion. Now, her name is Lisa Turan, and you need to have her on, Emily. Okay.
I'll have a look. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, she's but she invited me to be a trustee, and I actually stayed for you do 9 years, then I had to go away for a year, but was there as an associate, and then was seconded back onto the board. But I knew that doing that would be the best training possible to become the CEO of a charity. And I particularly wanted to work in the sphere of children, because I'm a dad, so it's easy to know where my priorities lie. And through that twisted and turning journey, I found myself ultimately here.
That's amazing. I often say to candidates, that are looking to make that move, it's a really important piece of the jigsaw to get sat on a board, so that you can understand the decisions that are made, why they're made, and what the expectations are of an operator within the sector. So it was, it's definitely a strong piece of advice, and something that you obviously did very successfully. So how did this first CEO role come about then? Talk me through as a candidate, that process that you followed to get the job.
Yeah, I mean, my first role was actually in an elderly care charity, and that was kind of good, because the board there were fantastic, and there's, you learn about things like governance, all the unsexy stuff that really keeps the wheels turning, and that was a valuable lesson for me, because you tend to look at the glamorous bits, like driving the fundraising and such like, but the nuts and bolts are very important too. And then the application for Kids came, and I almost missed it. I mean, because they didn't particularly, I don't think they advertised it particularly widely, because they had a huge response.
Right.
And I they told me they had 400 responses, and to which I said, well, I had to murder 399 people then before. I'm joking. But I mean, what really resonated with me was, the whole story. I wanted to work in an international environment, having enjoyed international work in my medical device career. So that was kind of really important to me. And honestly, if you're not moved when yeah, when you hear the story of what Kids for Kids is and what it's become, if you're not moved, then you're in the wrong room, clearly,
Mm.
because it was such an easy thing for me to decide to pursue.
Mm. One of my favourite stories from our first conversation was actually about the application.
Yeah,
I think you told me that you nearly didn't apply, and then you had you wrote a covering letter, I think, didn't you? Talk me through
yeah.
that.
Well, yeah, because I mean, let's be really honest. Most of the applications I see now are probably being written by AI.
Yes.
There's a piece going on in there, isn't there? And I've probably been guilty of that myself in the past too. But for this one, I don't know why, but I sat down. It was quite near the kind of the expiry period of the advert itself. I just wrote a letter, essentially. And you know what, Emily? I don't think I even read it through afterwards,
Oh,
which
really?
is which breaks the golden rule, doesn't it, of
Yeah.
all applications? And it was just kind of like, because I think I was still in awe of the story.
Mm.
And the lovely part about this is that I did write a note at the bottom saying I wrote this myself, not through AI. um, and then I was invited. The process was really quick as well, which was nice, because you know how interview process can get really protracted. So the process was quick, and which said to me, this is a very nimble organisation that can respond quickly, and I wasn't wrong. But I then was invited to meet some of the trustees and Patricia, and this is the bit that sold it for me. I then had to sell myself, but the thing, I walked and knocked on the door, and I was greeted at the door not with hello or oh please do come in, take your shoes off. I loved your letter.
Oh,
Boom. So that
yeah.
was all I needed, and so from then, as far as I was concerned, it was just a conversation about when can we get started, because
Yeah.
yeah, it was one of those serendipitous moments.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
For anyone listening and thinking about that move from the commercial sector into the charities, what misconceptions did you have before making that leap, would you say?
Well, I did the trusteeship first because that cured me of a lot of the misconceptions that I may have carried with me into if I'd just gone sort of blindly
Mm.
into the role. So, in fact, a bit of advice I would say to anybody if they're wanting to do this journey is to really look at trusteeship of
Yeah.
something that connects with you. Don't just
Mm.
take the first thing that's available, something you care about, because I think that's a really important lesson to learn, because then I was cured of the misconception of, oh, compliance doesn't matter, because it really does.
Right.
And understanding public confidence in charities is really important, because it tailors essentially your fundraising messages have to resonate with your donors. So all I took was positives from my journey into charity CEO, and I think I came into it with my eyes wide open. What I think didn't understand, or rather took me a while to realise, is actually how tough it is. Fundraising, which is the key element of every CEO's role, and is
Mm.
one that Patricia and Alistair in particular reinforced to me on frequent occasions. It's hard. It's hard because we're living in a world where people are feeling the pinch. The cost of living isn't getting any less. Public confidence in charities, I keep saying it is at an all-time average, but it is coming back, I think,
Yes.
which is a good thing. But generally, we're dealing in a pool that is getting smaller every year. I think some charities are really struggling to keep the doors open, and it becomes competitive, which is a shame, because that every single charity has a good reason to exist, and therefore has a good reason to persist.
Yes.
But we have to be really clear about our marketing message and everything else to make sure that we're still able to serve the people we wish to serve.
So is Alistair involved in the organisation as well still?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
from day one.
amazing.
Yeah, from
Oh,
day
right.
one, they've
Okay.
both been evident, and they have such a perspective. I mean, you can't buy experience, can you?
No.
But you can listen to it, and sometimes that can be frustrating if I get terribly excited about some initiative, and we've done that, and these are the pitfalls, and just to really consider whether you want to go down that road, or
Mm.
think about something else. But that's what trusteeship is about, isn't it? It's about providing that challenging friend sitting on your shoulder telling you whether it's a good idea or not.
Absolutely. And that brings us nicely on to talking about the that transition into this role. When you're following somebody with such a legacy, there's such an enormous responsibility to keep the message going, but also you've been brought in for a specific reason, haven't you, to sort of grow the organization and take it into the next phase. So talk us a little bit through the strategy. You started this by saying, what do we want to be when we grow up? Did you come up with an answer to that in your strategy meeting yesterday?
Yeah, we did, which was nice. Well, it's an interesting thing because I could sit in a room with my colleagues, and I will name check two of them, Davina and Sage, both of who have got long tenure with the charity. We could come up with it ourselves and make a reasonable stab at what we think it should look like. But I don't think that then really is drawing on the best capabilities of this extended team that we have, because any charity that is blessed with an engaged board has to use that level of differing opinions and different perspectives, and that's what this whole process of having the strategy day yesterday was all about, bringing all of that knowledge, all of that thought, all of that insight, all of that perspective, all of that care into defining where we go. And the thing is, Emily, what we need to remember is I'm defining a strategy that I won't be around to execute, because in 25 years' time, who knows where I'll be? Or I'll be nearly 30. So it's actually about putting down those roots in the same way that Patricia, at the very outset of the charity, put down that marker that said, we are going to do this. And for 25 years, they've very successfully done exactly that. So to then thrive and survive in a competitive situation, as all charities are, we need to not necessarily change, but we need to elevate, and we need to grow, we need to expand, but we need to be able to continue to fulfill our charitable objectives. And inevitably that means, obviously, more funds need to be raised, some recruitment needs to happen. But I was most concerned, and the question I asked, of the group yesterday was this very sort of, describe who we are in 5 years. What does that look like? And whilst we kind of honed in on a vision statement as such, that I thought captured that, the important piece for me then was to actually break that down into these buckets of activity, these strategic imperatives that will determine the achievement of our vision. And so that process of literally hitting those first two steps, vision and then strategic imperatives, informs the rest of the plan. So now we go and build a financial plan to support that. We define the smart objectives that will deliver on the imperatives. We then make people accountable, and we define the metrics so that we can actually monitor how we're going. And that's not revolutionary. That's kind of pretty straightforward planning, but it's actually about doing it so that it's formal, and and people realize what their expectations are. And and for me, that's a process that needs to happen quickly but reliably and accurately as we move forward.
And where does the networking piece fit into that for you as an organisation? I know a lot of organisations focus on partnerships and collaborations and things like that. Talk me through where that fits for kids.
Yeah, I mean, if you sort of put the fundraising hat on, I suppose, for a second, in terms of network development, if I look at the way Kids for Kids is structured right now, and the supporters who've been with us on this journey, there's some interesting demographics that come through that. I mean, for example, a huge, overwhelming concentration of our support is very much based around the locality of where Kids for Kids has been. As one of the trustees quickly pointed out yesterday, that just says opportunity for us to take the message further. So I think we need to focus on becoming a kind of a national name, in the same way that some other charities are recognised in that way. International as well. I think there's an opportunity as resources allow, for us to expand our presence internationally in terms of our supporter base. And we get, there is an element of that. There's some support in the United States, for example. We have some support in Australia, and we get occasional inquiries through. But I would really like to optimize that part of our base as well, because I think that there's a huge opportunity.
What exciting times, to be faced with, and
Oh my God,
lots of different directions you can take the organisation by the sounds of it, which is, a really fascinating journey to follow, I think.
Yeah.
I know one of the things that we spoke about in our original call was how leadership can be lonely. Talk me through what your experience of networking across the charity sector's looked like so far.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I don't like to be alone. As we all know, I mean, loneliness is terrible. And obviously, because we've moved to hybrid working these days, of course, it's changed the game again, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Which is probably another subject. I mean, I tried in recent times to really kind of, in my local area, identify charity CEOs, just to become almost an informal coffee club stroke support group. And it's failed because obviously there's competing priorities, there's diaries to consider. I think there's this nagging suspicion that people are just, you're wanting to spy on your neighbour, which is really not the case. I do think there's an opportunity to support. So I'm not going to give up on that, Emily, in terms of interfacing with local CEOs, just to have a kind of an informal network of support. And who knows where that takes us. I mean, collaboration is one thing, strategic partnership is another. And I don't necessarily think that's on offer, but I do think a friendly ear, a kind of an informal, non-executive network could help everybody. And so I will persist, and I will report back. And I'll have
to put you in touch with one of my other podcast guests, Craig
Please.
Dearden Phillips, that I think he's coming out actually next week. He set up a peer support network in Manchester around charity CEOs all networking, getting together in the room to talk about sharing mistakes, learning from each other. I think it came out of COVID actually, but he talks about that on the podcast, so you'll have to have a listen. And I know you've already connected, I think, with some of our other guests, so I think there's definitely an appetite for it. It's just about finding the right people, isn't it? And as I said to you, I think at the time it was really one of the reasons we started the podcast, because I get to hear these inspirational stories all the time, and then you'd be speaking to candidates and clients that were saying, it's quite isolating, and I think I could just need to connect these people because there are so many similar stories, similar struggles, and it really does help having that network of people around you, doesn't it? So so I've got some quick fire questions before we finish, if that's okay. I'm looking for one word to describe your first 6 months in the role.
Transformative.
Oh, I love that. I'm not asking for more. People can come and find you for more, can't they? In terms of your networking, if they want answers, longer answers, they can come and seek you out on LinkedIn.
I hope so.
What's the best piece of leadership advice you've ever received?
Allow people the space in which to deliver the very best of themselves.
Love that. I absolutely love that. Well, who inspires you?
My wife, my children, my grandchildren.
Oh, that's lovely. And I nearly had the answer for you there. I was waiting for the kids. I knew it. And what keeps you so optimistic?
Well, I think the alternative is a bit depressing. What keeps me optimistic is, every day I get up, and if I see the ground beneath me, I'll say that's a good day. The day that I get up and I have to look up to see the ground, it means, I'm no longer, and so I no longer have to worry. But I tell you what makes me optimistic, and this is a slightly longer answer than you wanted, but I'm going to say it anyway. Anybody that chooses to make a donation, whether it be to Kids for Kids or whoever, it doesn't matter, but anybody that becomes a donor to an organisation effectively then makes me, my team, whoever, the charity, a custodian, if you like, of their generosity, of their kindness, of their intended legacy. So then I have to take that donation and I entrust that to the people that have allowed us into their community to support them. And they may plant a seed. That seed is going to become a tree, and that tree is going to take generations in which to grow and to, become and do what trees do. One of the things trees do is they provide shade to people. And somebody, a generation down the line, is going to sit under that tree and take shade. And that somebody, that donor and I will never meet. And yet we've made a pact with that community that that's how the future that we want to instruct for them. And I think that is very powerful for me to understand the consequence of a simple act of putting a 10p in a tin or whatever you do. And so I'm optimistic that people will continue to feel and see that and make that connection so that they understand and trust in us, in me, to allow us to work on their behalf to help a community flourish. And we define communities, often we define them by what they lack. That's not right. What we should define them by is the incredible human potential that exists within everybody. And so what keeps me optimistic is that somebody cares enough to entrust me with their donation so that I can release that human potential in somebody else, and then the circle will pay itself back because those people will grow up and they will do similar things in their life. That to me is that's a consequential existence.
That's a brilliant answer to that question. Thank you for that. I loved it. So final question now is around Kids for Kids 5 years from now. What are you hoping people will be saying about you as an organisation?
I hope that they'll know who we are.
Yes.
Number one. I hope that Patricia's name will be mentioned alongside some of the great people of great ladies of this country, and I'm sure that's going to be the case. I hope that they'll be saying we made and continue to make a real difference, and that we are what's the word? I think just that we care enough to continue doing what we're doing, and then one day I hope that we won't be needed.
Yes.
Because like all charity, we exist to serve a need, and when that need is met, in theory, that should be our end. Absolutely. Honestly, Emily, we're a long way from that. That's the truth. But yes. And we don't control that. That's at the behest of other forces. One day we won't be needed, and then great.
Yes,
we'll
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Andy, thank you so much. I've thoroughly enjoyed today's conversation. It's been absolutely fascinating. Not just about the Kids for Kids web, but also your own leadership journey. The whole thing has been lovely. So thank you so much for joining us. And obviously, thanks to our listeners for continuing to support us. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please do subscribe and leave us a review and share it with somebody else working in the sector. We are all about development of the sector and trying to support where we can. So until next time, thanks so much for listening, and bye for now, Andy.
Thank you very much. Take care.